In this episode of Your Story, I'm going to ask the 3 questions you need to ask yourself before you start writing your memoir. Welcome to Your Story. Before you sit down and start writing your memoir, I suggest that you determine what the theme of your story is going to be about. And for the purposes of this video, when I talk about theme, I mean the message that is involved and also the tone of the story that you're going to write. And in order to do this, I have 3 questions that you can ask yourself that will help set up the theme and tone of the story and get you all prepped for the writing process. By doing this, you're going to be able to decide what events and elements belong in your story and which ones to leave out, which characters to include, which characters that even though they might be involved in the events that happened, they don't contribute to the theme, to the story as a whole, and maybe you can leave them out. And before you go on and say, that sounds like something only professional writers do, trust me, it's easy. You'll be able to find that you don't have any problem answering these questions and coming up with a theme that's going to help you in the rest of the process. This is going to also help you focus your words. That's what I mean when I talk about tone. And if that sounds maybe vaguely familiar, think about you or maybe other parents when they've talked to their children and said, you better use your indoor voice. Well, when you think about it that way, it doesn't seem that hard, does it? We often direct our words in a way that's different if we're talking to an adult, or we're talking to a youth, or we're talking to our parents, or we're talking to strangers, if we're talking to coworkers. We do that all the time. It's something that you do all the time. We all do that. We modify our language based on the audience, based on who we're talking with. So that's what we're talking about here. We're going to get a theme, we're going to get the tone, and it's going to make your story more readable when you have both of those things going for you. All right, now, I suppose there's a possibility that someone out there speaks the same way to everyone that they meet. And I got to tell you that at some point, I'd really like to sit down with you and have a discussion about how that goes. I have to think that there's a lot of great stories that go with that because I can't imagine that it works all the time. And those stories where it's not working would be highly entertaining. But I think for most of us, this is going to be something that we are familiar with, even though we don't recognize it by calling it tone. All right, that's a writer term. But all it means is that we're directing our language in a way that we expect the other person will understand. We do it automatically. The first question I'm going to ask is, why are you writing a memoir? And there's no right or wrong answer to this. There's a ton of excellent reasons for writing a story about yourself or about a family member, all of them valid. Let me give you a short list of reasons why a person might write a memoir. And if your reason isn't on the list, that's okay. This is just to give you a few ideas. And I hope that after you listen to the list and you think about it a while, maybe you'll pick one of those. Maybe you'll pick your own. I mean, it might be better if you pick your own because that's going to be closer to your heart. That story that you'll be telling will be something that you feel more strongly, and you definitely want that as you're writing. You might want to write a memoir so that the people in your story are not forgotten. You might want to write a memoir because the person in your story did something important and their experience will help others. And that person, that could be you. You might want to write a memoir because you want to leave a legacy for your family. You might want to write a memoir to grow closer to an older generation by learning and sharing their stories. You might want to write a memoir because you love the stories you have heard from others and want to share them. You might write a family story because you want to turn the abstract details of family history into something fun and personal. And you might want to write a memoir or family story because you realize that each of our lives touches the lives of others, and you want to share some of those stories with them. All right. And so that wasn't exactly questions about why you want to write a memoir. That was really a question why you want to write a story. That could be a memoir, or it could be a family story, family history story. It could even be reasons why you want to write in your journal. But all of these questions work. They apply for all of those different kinds of writing equally. So I thought I would include the family story parts as well, in case that is something that you are also interested in doing. The reason I wrote The Milkman's Son is I realized that the experience of discovering that one of your parents is not your biological parent was an event, was a thing that happened to an increasingly larger number of people. There were plenty of people who are going through the same experience as me, or would be going through the same experience as me in the years to come. And I knew that I had, as a writer, the ability to put my words out there, because a lot of times someone's encountering an event, a traumatic event like this, and they're not sure what to make of it. They can't put words to it. And because of my experience as a writer, I felt that I would be able to put those words to the experience, and that would make it easier for them. I wanted to help people get through that same experience that I had. Knowing why I wanted to write a story made it easier for me to pick out elements to include in the story. I knew which emotions I wanted to touch upon. I knew which information that I wanted to share with others. And so I would look through all the events that happened during the 2-year period that my memoir covers, and I would know that this would fit. This would fit my message. This would fit the tone. This would fit the emotional struggle I was feeling that I expected other people would also be feeling. So answering this question made it very easy for me to know what to include, and I made a list. I made a list of all these things that were part of the reason I wanted to write my memoir. The next question to ask yourself is, what message are you trying to share with others? If you watched my last video, hopefully you already have an idea of what that message is, and you can kind of answer this easily enough. And just like knowing why you want to write a memoir, understanding what your message is going to continue to allow you to pick events and emotions and elements during this time period that you're going to be discussing, and to include it in the story. Do you want readers to be hopeful for a happy resolution to a situation that is similar to yours? Do you want people to be more sympathetic for those in a situation similar to yours? Or is the purpose of your story to get others to think about the experience others are having on a daily basis, reflect on how it affects their lives, and maybe even put themselves into that situation and wonder what it would be like for them to have the same struggles as a person that you're writing about, which, if this is a memoir, that's going to be you. My message for The Milkman's Son was, love makes us family. In order to show my message to my readers, I included thoughts of confusion over not knowing if I really belonged to any family, concerns about whether the family I grew up with still loved me, concerns about how my new family would react to the news, comparisons to how my stepchildren and my adopted children fit into the idea of family, and finally, how the situation was resolved with all of my family. Do you see how you can take a look at that list and determine if an event will fit into your theme? How it will make the story stronger because you continue to reinforce your theme with example after example of what you want the reader to understand or feel or experience. And the reverse is true. So you can look at that theme and you can decide that some people don't really help that theme along, and you can leave them out of the story. You can decide that some events, even though they are sort of related, but they're not fitting into the theme, they can be left out. I mean, that's okay, because a memoir isn't about everything that happens to you. It's about the things that happen to you that enforce or reinforce, not enforce, because we're not sending enforcers out there to strong arm anyone. Reinforce the theme that you have, that the message that you want to share. Basically, what I did was pick out the moments where I felt loved by family and I felt part of family. And then I also picked out those moments where I felt the opposite, that I didn't feel that I belonged anywhere. And I used both of them. I mean, so that gives conflict, and that's a different topic. We'll cover conflict at a later time. But using both of them, I was able to cover a wide spectrum of emotions that were all applicable to my theme. The final question you want to ask yourself is, who is my audience? Or to be put in a simpler term, more basic term, is who do I want to read my story? Who do I expect to read my story? And the reason for this is pretty simple. Based on who our audience is, who we're wanting to tell our story to, is going to affect how we write the story. If this were to be for young people, maybe it's an experience that you had in your teens and you've learned so much since then and you want to write about it so that they might avoid some of the same problems that you ran into in life. All right, it should sound different. It should sound more youthful. It should be written at a level where teenagers are going to be able to understand that. Stories for younger children probably won't want to include profanity, and maybe some situations will be too intense for them. I'll probably want to leave out bloody descriptions and other things that possibly could work in a memoir about drug addiction or the horrors of war or such other situations. Who your audience is really can help you define, again, which events to use, which emotions to use, which thoughts to use that are appropriate, and which ones to leave out. When I wrote The Milkman's Son, I wanted it to be fun, lighthearted, plenty of humor, in order to reflect my view on the topic. I want to encourage people to not be afraid of taking a DNA test, not being afraid to discover that there is a surprise in their family. It turned out good for me, and it won't turn out good for everyone, but it's going to turn out good for a lot of people. And in my mind, good or bad, I would want to know the truth. And I'm not going to convince people to take a DNA test and discover their real families if my story is depressing and shocking and horrible. That's just going to make people afraid to take the test. So see, I had a purpose, and my writing reflected that purpose and that intention and my audience. So definitely, I wanted my audience to be those people who might be thinking about taking a test and finding out. There's a lot of reasons to take a test for genealogy reasons. So it's not always because you want to find out if your parents are really your parents. But this definitely helped me know what to include for my story because that's what I wanted. I think you'll find that if you ask yourself these three questions, you'll be able to put together a list of events that happen. And I call them events. Later on, I might call them scenes. And all that basically means is there's a bunch of people together at one place at one time, and that's what happened. That's a scene or that's an event. All right? So with these three questions, you'll be able to create a nice list of events that from that you can create a story. And we'll cover that more in detail in a later video. But at least you're started. At least you have the questions so that you can start thinking about it and so you can start making that list. Just a quick reminder, if you don't want to wait for 30 videos in order to understand all the secrets to writing an excellent memoir, you can check out my book, The Easy Peasy Method for Writing Memoirs and Family Stories. I'll put a link to where you can find the book in the description section below. And don't worry, you can do this. There are people out there waiting to hear your story.